where do most organizations struggle when we connect AI to a concrete outcome?
There is this friction between the willingness and the need to implement AI to some degree versus how grounded this is in actual like material outcomes that you're expecting to generate out of these efforts.
Paul, from a strategic standpoint, from growth acceleration partners, what would you like to advise?
As a leader in your organization, there are a few key questions to ask. What is our data value hypothesis? If I have this data, I can generate these conclusions or take these actions.
Welcome to the Don't Panic, It's Just Data podcast, exploring how organizations turn data into measurable business advantages. I'm your host, Trisha Pillay, the editor and host of this episode. And as many of you know, many organizations have bold AI ambitions, but far fewer are seeing a clear revenue impact. In this conversation, we're going to examine the revenue data gap, the growing mandate for velocity, and why data contracts may be one of the most overlooked engines behind enterprise AI success. To unpack this, I'm joined by Paul Brownell, Chief Technology Officer, and Sergio Morales, Data and AI Engineering Leader from Growth Acceleration Partners. Paul and Sergio, welcome to the show.
Hi, Trisha. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So before we get into the conversation, can you tell our audience about yourself and your role at the organization? Paul, I'll start with you and then we can transition over to Sergio.
After about 15 years building SaaS applications, I joined Gap to help our customers do the same. And here at Gap, I've been the CTO leading our teams. And one of the key things that I do every day is working with our clients to understand their business needs and to pair those business needs with technical solutions. So working at that intersection of business and technology.
Excellent. And Sergio?
Yeah, hi. So I'm a principal data engineer here at Gap. I'm a subject matter expert for data and AI, which means I get to sit in a lot of calls with clients and our internal teams trying to figure out how to make their data deployments and data projects more robust. And now with the AI boom, we've also been exploring a lot of data transformation journeys alongside those lines.
Great. So I think you guys both have a lot of experience in your fields, but everything is just AI, right? So Paul, I'm going to start off with you. Let's start broad, right? When you look at enterprises AI today, where do you see the biggest disconnect between ambition and execution, particularly when it comes to revenue impact, right? And we've been talking about revenue data gap. What does that mean? Can you explain it to our audience?
Sure. Well, I think you started out well, Trisha, with everything is AI. So many enterprises are approaching AI from the perspective of, here's this shiny penny, let's go do something AI. And they haven't really thought through a couple of key dimensions. One is, what is our theory of benefit? Like, where can we actually use our data to either reduce cost or increase revenue? And then the second is, even if they have a theory about how they can get there, their data just isn't in the good enough shape to support that. Either there's data quality issues, or they don't even know where the data is, or how they can best govern it. So those are the two biggest parts of the value gap when it comes to data.
So that's quite interesting, Paul. But also have the technical side of this. And Sergio, I want to bring you into the conversation. From your perspective, what does it take for an AI initiative to move beyond theory and actually deliver measurable business impact, right? Everything is good in theory, but nothing in practical, right? So where do most organizations struggle when we connect AI to a concrete outcome?
So, Trisha, I feel like something that I keep hammering over and over, and Paul will attest to this undoubtedly. It's the fact that I think organizations that are not prepared for deploying AI projects or undertaking a transformational data journey fundamentally must have also had those same kinds of issues before when it came to tackling huge scale transformational projects or software development projects. Because despite the very sizable impact that AI is having in the industry, the effort that it takes and the engineering expertise that it takes to undertake these transformations are fundamentally the same ones that all transformations required. So when it came to adapting to cloud architectures, when it came to adapting microservice models, when it came to even so far back as whenever like NoSQL engines came into popularity, those are the same kinds of engineering efforts and design solution necessities that are arising now for these organizations. So less than throwing yourself headfirst into the first AI project that you find or that you think might be useful, just as it was with other technologies, you have to root it in actual business requirements, and you have to have a North Star that is defined by some business need that you're trying to fulfill. So there is this friction between the willingness and the need to implement AI to some degree versus how grounded this is in actual like material outcomes that you're expecting to generate out of these efforts. So I think that's where I see organizations struggle the most.
I think you bring a good point there as well, because there's always a debate between legacy architecture and people moving from cloud environment. But I just want to pick your brain on that, Sergio. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to, I know I'm just throwing in some questions here, but legacy architecture, right? What are the biggest challenges? Because you have more organizations that are older or just been here around for generations. So change is hard. Even in my daily life, change is hard. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is something that's been in our wheelhouse for decades now, right? So, even before we had a data practice, we were helping other companies undertake these huge transformations because no matter what industry you're in, and I am biased because I have been a technologist for most of my life, but specifically in the software development industry, uh, being nimble and flexible and being able to adapt to new standards and trends has been always a fundamental ability that you need to take ownership of and be really good at if you want to survive in this space. We work with a lot of verticals. We work with a lot of different companies with different business contexts, and um, thing that they all have in common is they have to be fast, they have to adapt to new evolutions in their fields, and keeping a pace with technology is absolutely a part of that now more than ever. And I think AI is just putting it out there, exposing it even more than before because of the speed requirements with which we are needing to adapt, and we are seeing other companies like have to keep a pace of.
I would add to that, Trisha, that specifically with legacy applications with older technologies that didn't envision needing to sort of branch outside of the core application, um, we see a lot of those kind of challenges to create external APIs to surface the data that's sort of trapped in legacy applications. So that's a very common need, is to data enable or AI enable legacy applications.
And data has always been a part of every business, right? So now that you have to level up and skill up to the point where you can leverage it for AI, well, all of the things that you have been carrying over for decades, all of those bad decisions on how to store data and how to move it and how to govern it, well, they are being exposed, they're being brought into the light because suddenly all of those things matter, and you are having to carry the weight of decisions that were taken 10, 15 years ago.
Some really good points there. Thank you so much for that. But Paul, I want to bring you in. When organizations approach you, how does the revenue data gap typically show up? We spoke about data now, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But how do you ensure conversations start with business problems before actually discussing AI solutions? As Sergio mentioned, data is so important, right? There's unstructured data, there's data that a lot of companies don't even understand. How do you close that gap?
Yeah, I think the tool that we most often use is to take a step back from the technical details about the data itself and where it's stored, but to really look at what is your data hypothesis. So, do you have a firm idea of, if I have good access to this data, I can achieve these conclusions or this level of automation. So the foundation is really having a good thesis around what we believe we can achieve for the data. So I encourage clients to take a step back and say, okay, what's the core theory? What are the 2 or 3 biggest business problems or opportunities that you can pursue using your data? And then start with that as the core and work outward.
So when you say, okay, data hypothesis, but what are the biggest problems that you've seen since being a CTO, or one of the biggest challenges businesses actually experience, just to follow up on that?
It runs the gamut. Some companies don't even have a clear data hypothesis. So they're like, we have this data and we really don't know what opportunities we have. So it requires exploration to say, given this data, what conclusions can I draw about my customer's behavior or my manufacturing process or the revenue opportunities ahead of me? Um, Others have a basic hypothesis, but they don't know where the data is. So then the investigation really gets into um, where are the sources of this data? How reliable are those sources? How confident are we, assuming we can get those answers that the hypothesis says, how reliable are those going to be? How confident are we going to be in those answers? And then if you have all of that, then you need to tie that to revenue. So then what's the actual financial benefit that you expect? So having also a hypothesis around, if I have this data, I can draw these conclusions. And if I can draw these conclusions, I can generate this revenue benefit or this reduction in cost. So having that entire value chain mapped out is key to success in my view.
I think that's a good point. Having the value chain mapped out is really, really important, and I think most businesses lack that in a practical sense. But I want to go back into the technical things of it, Sergio. The velocity mandate, right? We hear about it, but what does that mean in practice? And how do you design systems that can move fast enough to support revenue decisions without compromising governance or infrastructure reliability?
Yeah, this is a really interesting subject, and I once again go back to my point of, the velocity mandate has always been there. This is just being brought back in full force now with AI, and we are seeing organizations and companies that weren't nimble in the past again struggle with the requirements of adapting AI and adapting robust governance policies and all of that. And I don't mean to scare uh, companies away of adapting AI or undertaking these big projects, because it can be intimidating to say, all right, there's a velocity mandate. I have to generate revenue. I have to generate results. I have to get buy-in, which is really important in our experience, in order to undertake the more ambitious parts of our visions when it comes to AI and data maturity. But how are we going to do that if we require to undertake first a governance overhaul that's going to take the better part of the year with no revenue increase or no like anything to show for it that is material and concrete in the way of business outcomes? And what we usually say to that is, you can actually do both. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can undertake and identify smaller goals that relate to both governance and AI and other data analytics projects, because many of the things that we also find is that organizations are lagging behind even when it comes to basic prescriptive and predictive and descriptive analytics, and pursue those at the same time that you do all of the necessary transformations and governance overhaul to undertake later more ambitious projects that are more closely tied to your infrastructure. They require you to have more robust orchestrated data pipelines with the adequate hooks for, let's say, an agentic approach to hook into, so that it can uh, trigger notifications, or it can act on specific conditions that are relevant to your business. All of that sounds very intimidating, because you do require very robust infrastructure, pipeline layouts and governance in order to put that into place. But meanwhile, you can identify the uh, lower hanging fruit and the quick wins that are going to get you there, that are going to get you the political bind that you require to get you there, and accomplish business outcomes without having to, again, take the better part of a year overhauling your infrastructure and governance policies. So there, it's absolutely possible to comply with that velocity mandate at the same time that you do things right and lay out all of the governance policies in a way that is uh, homogeneous and robust and scalable. But that is going to take time, and that is going to take exploratory processes and meeting with subject matter experts and letting your business domain owners kind of take the decisions and learn what they need to learn in order for them to assess what the best policies are going to be. So it's definitely, again, a little bit of friction between being able to comply with the velocity mandate. We have to do things quick, but we also have to do them right. And there is an order you can choose in order to get those outcomes quickly at the same time that you are working towards those that are going to take a longer time.
I think you bring up a very good point there. It's baby steps, right? Everybody just wants to put everything and do everything so quickly, and then they miss the gaps there. And that's when it's so important to do the skills gaps, right? Where your company and all your employees need to understand what AI is all about. So that's a really good point, Sergio. Paul, when you look at the strategic approach, how would you support Sergio's technical implementation? And I'll bring it back to Sergio after you answer this.
Yeah, I think the two fit very nicely together because from the strategic approach, if you can focus on one to two key business priorities, then that gives you a success path that you can follow while you're putting the infrastructure in place. It's not just infrastructure for infrastructure's sake. It is uh, building toward a specific goal. And so at the end of you build just enough infrastructure to support that data workflow and that data lifecycle, and you get some value out of it. And then you can go back and repeat and do a second and a third that build on top of each other. But it's really a very pragmatic approach to pick some very specific use cases, very specific data environments, and implement those and establish a track record of success first. It just helps with the human aspect of change management as well, right? Nobody, nothing sells success better than success. So if you create one success where you've generated some value with this implementation, then it encourages people to try again and say, okay, we were successful the last time. There's no reason we can't do this a second, third, fourth, and number of times.
Coming back from what Paul is saying, Sergio, what do you think are the most important engineering considerations, rather, to turn strategic goals into production-ready AI initiatives?
Engineering considerations. Let's see. So again, they always have to be rooted towards a business outcome that wants to be accomplished or that wants to be met. So again, no development for development's sake or infrastructure layout for infrastructure's layout sake. I think most of these big projects have to follow an exploratory process that determines, again, what data assets are the ones that are most relevant for whatever you're undertaking, how these data assets are being handled in terms of governance. So this speaks to data lifecycle policies. This speaks to data ownership and stewardship. This speaks to master data management, data contracts, as you mentioned in your introduction. This speaks to, again, the pipelines through which these are going to move, the way they are orchestrated, and of course also the engineering patterns behind them all, right? You have to choose the right approach when it comes to different sorts of transformations and different sorts of, again, material outcomes, whether they're going to manifest as improvements in your development process or improvements in your um, quality assurance processes or improvements for your actual consumers, like if this is something that's being to be exposed to consumers or whoever's going to be using your service. So it all depends. And we often find that when it comes to AI in particular, it's like engineers forget themselves, right? They go with their first impulse in terms of how to, now that we have all these magical engines, right? Great black boxes that help us get faster from point A to B, we forget that these are part of, again, engineered processes. And they often fit better as components within engineered pipelines that use the same technologies that we have been using to orchestrate them for years and years. And we often spring to our first sort of impulse solution rather than doing a proper solution design process where we try to, again, keep costs low, because that is always fundamental, and we use the best tool for the job. So I often see a lot of engineers like losing the not seeing the forest for the trees, and figuring out, having to go through this process all over again from, okay, now I have this new set of verbs that AI allows me to do or to execute. How do I integrate them into what I already knew how to do? And I feel that that's one of the biggest challenges that we have seen. And that's why we have such a pragmatic vision of how to implement AI, because we often return to engineering. We often go back to, this is all data engineering, this is all pipelines, this is all orchestrations, this is all infrastructure.
You bring some good points there, and I want to go back to data contracts, right? It's increasingly cited as critical for AI projects, and I want to pose this to both of you, this question. How do they actually function as an engine for velocity, trust, alignment across teams? And maybe give us some real world case studies. So we're implementing data contracts materially improve the delivery and speed or quality.
So it's funny because data contracts are, again, like a natural consequence, like an organic consequence of good infrastructure design and good governance. So materially, what data contracts are is basically a way to technically enforce data schemas and data transformations in a way that is sort of robusticize the master data management and source of truth and data catalog aspect of your organization. So again, they often take the form of like a simple file that gets declared somewhere in your data sort of schema catalog. And then it gets picked up by a variety of tools like continuous integration and continuous development tools, your data sources and ingestion processes like APIs, and so on and so forth. And what these do is they basically reject anything that does not comply with the schema that is declared herein, right? But this is just, again, like a natural consequence of having good governance practices. Because if you don't have good governance practices already, then everything they're going to do is they're going to prevent data from coming into the data environment, because the data is going to be broken because the producers of that data are not complying with the data contract. So it's very good at preventing catastrophic failures in the sense that there no model that is consuming the data that is being produced by these sources of data is going to be broken, because no data is going to be coming in. But your organization is going to be dead in the water if you're not actively complying with these contracts. So how are you going to be actively complying with these contracts? It's by socializing within your company how data should be handled and how important complying with schemas and having your producers be aligned in terms of the format that this data has to be in, and how it has to be coming in, and how it has to behave, and how change management should be handled whenever a column is added or removed or what have you for a data set. So it's a very interesting manifestation of how you can enforce these policies that you have already in place in terms of governance and data storage and moving data from one place to the other. But the real engine behind it is the humans and the data stewards and data owners that have to comply with these contracts. You can have as many contracts as you want, and they can be either in paper or enforced in such a way that, again, they're going to prevent catastrophic failures if anything comes in a format that is not supposed to be in. But in the end, what you need is a nimble, educated, well organized, uh, again, a structure of people that like fundamentally know how things should work, and socializing the the requirements within the data contracts is almost as important as being able to write them. Writing them is probably the easiest part.
The data contracts really ensure the quality of the output or the quality of the decisions that you're making. As an example, we're working with a manufacturing client, and this is especially true the larger a company becomes. This manufacturing client, they have an ERP, they have inventory management systems in the manufacturing facilities, and their variety of different data sources. Each of those domains are managed by completely different departments with their own mission to accomplish as part of the company. The very first step is let's identify those data sources. Let's get in place clear data contracts so each of the contributors of data in their application domains, in the ERP, in the systems on the manufacturing floor, et cetera, that they could provide the data in a consistent way where we know the quality of the data that we're getting, and we know if we make decisions based on this data that those results are going to be valid. So getting the data governance aspects in place with those contracts is really key. And it's just another example of, picking an end-to-end workflow. We're not trying to create all the data contracts for all the master data for the entire corporation. We're going to start with what are the data contracts we need to solve this? Let's go get those in place. We'll have a standard way of cataloging them.
So thanks for that, Paul. That was very interesting and strategic, and Sergio as well. But we're running up on time, and I want to give our listeners some practical takeaways, right? Paul, from a strategic standpoint, from growth acceleration partners, what would you like to advise? And then Sergio, I'll throw it to you from an engineering standpoint. What needs to be placed before rolling out this ambitious AI initiatives? So we'll start off with you, Paul.
Yeah, I'd say from a strategic standpoint, as a leader in your organization, there's a few key questions to ask. One, what is our data value hypothesis? If I have this data, I can generate these conclusions or take these actions. Second, how does that hypothesis turn into a value equation? So what's the monetary benefit, either reduced cost or increased revenue, customer satisfaction? What are the quantitative benefits? And then to drill down one level from that, in support of that hypothesis, do we have the data that we have? Is it organized and is it reliable? So if you can identify that for the top 1 to 3 use cases, then you have a platform where you can build some success.
Sergio?
Yeah, so I would go first of all, just training yourself to recognize the verbs to which you have access now with this new toolset in terms of AI. But when it comes to governance and orchestration, I feel the most homogenized you can make your current integrations and your current the way the pipelines are orchestrated, the more you can, again, simplify all of those, you can get closer to having a much better position from which you can launch yourself towards these ambitious projects. In terms of governance, there is the cataloging aspect, having just well identified business domains for your governance approach, having well identified owners for each of the major datasets that you're using. And like Paul says, we can have a pragmatic approach where we're not mapping out every single dataset or data product within your organization. You can only just choose the ones that are most relevant for the projects that you can see like already coming up. And then having a good vision of those data schemas and layouts and lifecycle policies, having all that not necessarily manifested as a um, technical asset somewhere within your infrastructure, but just being aware of it, like even having just socialized it so that people can speak to it and then have someone whether it's your internal engineering team or whether it's an external engineering team, come in and be able to very quickly grasp what those data sets are, how they are supposed to be used, what the compliance aspects for them are, what are the, again, data contracts that they have to fulfill. And then that's going to really speed you up in your journey towards these really ambitious undertakings in terms of data engineering, data science, data analytics, even business intelligence. No matter what you're going to do, really having all your data and your awareness of your data accessible and easy to find, that's going to take you a long way towards that endpoint.
That's some really good advice. So, pragmatic approach and make sure that your data is in check. That's what I took away from it. Paul and Sergio, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It was a pleasure to have you both here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
this was great. Thank you for having us.
And to our audience, if you would like to learn more about what we spoke about, visit www.growthaccelerationpartners.com. You'll see it on your screen now. And if you enjoyed this, we'll be back next week with another episode in our podcast series. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all major platforms and follow the conversation on our socials at EM360Tech on X and LinkedIn. And for more great daily content, head over onto our website. Until then, goodbye.